Hi everybody, welcome to week 7 of the healthcare research course. We're almost there. Apologize for a little sniffly and congestion. I think I'm coming down with a cold. All right, let's plug forward. So this week in your discussion question, the first one talks about implications and recommendations. In my mind, for my own definitions and writing, I have a really clear idea of what I put in implications and what I put in recommendations. But as you dig through literature and you read various articles, you'll find that some authors and researchers don't view those things as quite clear cut. So I'll be looking forward to hearing your information that you find about the differences between implications and recommendations. And then the second DQ question talks about limitations. We've talked about some limitations. For instance, just with ANCOVA, we said that a limitation is if you have not done randomized sampling. That could lead to problems if you don't use random sampling and you use ANCOVA as a statistic. And then we've talked about other things like limitations of how any type of sample was selected, how the people were chosen, how did they find out about it. And then there's all other types of limitations. So I'm really going to enjoy talking to you about that this week. Limitations, the limitations section is very interesting when you're looking at possibly taking something from the literature and implementing it in your own setting. I think the limitations can help you see if maybe this is a realistic something that you might want to implement. So it really is an important section to look at when you're evaluating research articles. Okay, then in looking at this week's written lecture, it talks about really getting evidence out there and how do we do that. It's definitely still a problem in nursing, but I think with the emphasis on evidence-based practice, it's getting there. But we talked about it's kind of hard for staff nurses to really be super involved in evidence-based practice, especially if they're not given any time away from regular staffing to work on that. I know myself, I teach a wide variety of courses, and so it's kind of really hard to keep up. And I do that mainly through articles and then continuing education. And I'm also considering this year in September going to the NLN's Nursing Education Summit. And there I get tons of new evidence-based information. So that's a good place too. And then attending specialty conferences, depending on what area you work in, are definitely helpful. I also took a look just for this year, the National Institutes of Health. Underneath that is the National Institute of Nursing Research. I took a look at what areas are their priorities for research this year. Because one year they had a priority about research, about ways of getting out research. But this year what they have is health promotion, disease prevention, eliminating health disparities. We've talked about that a little bit in our course. Caregiving, symptom management, and self-management. So those are the areas that are going to have priorities of funding through the National Institute of Health. I just thought you might find that interesting, the things that really the gurus on nursing research are looking at as the priorities right now. So as we go through this week and next week, we will interlace a little bit about how do we get research out there once it's been conducted. Okay. So I'm looking forward to reading your article critiques part 2. That was about the methods section. And I know some of you struggled with that a bit, so I hope at least you gave it a good try and answered all of the required questions in box 5.2 and 5.3 in chapter 5 in your text. And then this week for your CLC project, you're going to be taking all that evidence-based practice stuff you've been accumulating, and you're going to be writing clinical guidelines and an implementation plan. And this is really where you pull everything together and say, okay, if we're going to use this, how would we make it real? What would be the best way to introduce it, okay? When you're writing that paper, you need to look at the directions, the written directions for the assignment, and also at the rubric. The rubric contains a few more things than just the directions. For instance, a timeline, barriers to implementation, so things that could be roadblocks along the way, and then drivers of implementation. Is there anything that's going to really push it through, that's going to make it happen? So in addition to the written directions, the rubric has included those. So really take a look at those two, and I would say make a list of everything included in the directions and the rubric to make an outline for your paper. Of course, the directions also provide you with a word limit, and that's going to be important in this paper. Now, if your group changed the focus of your project, then you will need to revise your problem statement, your foreground question. You'll probably need to fine-tune your literature review. So just keep those in mind, because this is kind of a big project, pulling all those pieces together. But I think if you divide it up amongst your groups, I have every confidence that you guys are going to do a great job. I'm really looking forward to reading how you're going to be pulling that all together. All right, then after that, we just have one more week, and you'll be working on the final sections of your individual article critiques. So we're really getting there. I do have a class question this week. I teach this course fairly often, and I'm definitely going to be teaching again this year. So what I need to know, is there any additional materials, teaching strategies that you would like to see incorporated in this course that you think it would make it easier for you to understand the material? That would be really helpful for me to know. If there's anything you can think of that you think would make that easier, or that you would have appreciated during the course, that would be great. So just respond to this post and list anything that you think would be helpful to my future students. All right, everybody. I think that's it for this week. I'll see you in the main forum.